Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We've got two more songs to go through in this week's theme of instrumental songs, so let's not waste any time, let's get right into it. Today's song is from a band, the song's called Amethyst. That's the word I can read. The name of the band, I'm probably going to butcher this. I looked up the word, I couldn't find. Usually I look up a word, I try to get a proper pronunciation as respect to the band or the composer or whoever. And I couldn't find one, so Murmuüre would be my guess. But yeah, that's probably wrong. Anyways, let's get into this song. Let's see what's going on here. And like I said, the song is Amethyst. Very atmospheric and without any strong rhythmic element to it. It's really hard to find the beat, but I'm feeling a very slow 4/4. Lots of playing around with dissonance, atonality, instability. There's some nice, interesting melody lines coming out, but they're not really adding up to anything yet. I'm interested in where this is going. Ooh. This just got very dark. Yeah, now we have a very clear chord because we have a rhythmic element to the music. Interesting volume dynamics being utilized on those drums, kind of fading in and out of prominence. Yeah, we finally saw some driving momentum in the drums, and then they cut out a little bit of setting up expectations and not delivering. I think those are screams in the background. I don't know, there's a lot of compression on this. It's really difficult to hear the original sound of any of these timbres. I like how the drums play around a bit with embellishment, never really sticking to just the metronome roll, but never straying too far from it either. Seems like we have a bit of a melody coming on here. But it's so buried. Even right there up until the end, there was just so much overdrive and compression put on it that um it was creating a crackling even during the quiet section. Um yeah, that's just that's a song. It's going to take me a second to figure out what exactly we had just listened to, because a lot of it is outside of my expertise, what I typically talk about and what I'm typically listening for. And I've kind of come around to changing how I listen to a lot of this harsher music by picking up on some of the ideas that I'm seeing get utilized throughout. A lot of them, some recurring ideas, and as well as what I've been told in the comments. What key features are of all these different subgenres and what's important to them, what helps them attain their sound, what their listeners are looking for. So I'm slowly coming around to understanding how some of this works, but then I run into something like this, which is just so far outside what I'm used to listening to. So I'm going to give this my best shot. But I can't promise any substantial analysis. Um, I do want to point out a couple of the things that I noticed that intrigued me or that I thought was done very well. And then we'll see if I can bring the whole song together into some sort of cohesive idea. The first is texture. This song feels, which is not usually what I talk about with texture, but I'm talking like a sort of auditory to physical feeling. How this song feels. It's very fuzzy and abrasive. And I can't say I've heard a song quite like this. At least maybe not to this extreme. And I think that might be the point that brings me the most intrigue here. Is that this is just we've seen stuff like this. This is a very repetitive track with a massive flattening of the sound, kind of bringing the highs and lows together into a more narrow line rather than having a lot of dynamics. Having a muddy mix, which allows the instruments to come together into a single sound rather than being able to individually hear everything, and really working in on that repetitive droning wall of sound, which is something we've seen in post music, like post metal. A little bit of that we can see inside of stuff like black metal. So I've heard music like this on this journey so far, but like I said, nothing that kind of pushes it as far as this one does. The flattening of the highs and lows is to such an extreme that you kind of feel highs and lows all the time. There's higher pitched stuff, there's lower pitched stuff like your bass kicks, but they all kind of feel like the same note, even though you can hear that they're different. You can hear some of these higher guitar notes, at least what I think are guitars, and the wailing that I pretty sure was the vocals, some sort of harsh vocal maybe, and then compressed and modified digitally beyond that. Some of those notes are certainly higher than your bass kicks, and maybe a couple of tom hits in the drums, but I can hear the pitch difference, but I don't feel the pitch difference. They feel like they're in the same spectrum of range, and that in itself is disorienting, at least for me. I don't know if anybody else gets that. Maybe if you're used to listening to this, it isn't that odd. But for me, it's a very disorienting sound because I'm used to hearing distance between these pitches, and I'm not hearing that. This type of mix also brings together all of the unique sounds. And again, this is something we've heard in other bands before, but again, not like this. Usually I can really hone in. I think one of the bands that did this wall of sound thing the most prominently for me is Cult of Luna. But at least there, if I really, really tried to pay attention and hone in on the bass sound or the guitar sound or one of the drums, I could. But here, I can't really hear anything distinct. This is just an amorphous blob of sonic ability. But to tie into that as well is how much the sounds of these instruments, of these timbres, these voices, have been distorted and destroyed for the purpose of the song. It's not just so much that I can't hear the different instruments because of the mix. I can't hear the different instruments because a lot of the key characteristics that differentiate the timbres between them has been destroyed in the process of making the music. Some of that is going to be through clipping. There's a lot of overdrive going on. When a sound clips, you're going to lose a lot of the color and you're going to get a less interesting sound from it. So we already have a loss of differentiation in the clipping, in the raw audio that comes in. But then there is a ton of stuff. The only thing I can really pick out is compression. There's a lot of compression going on, but mixing and mastering is not really my strong suit, so I can't tell you exactly what they're doing to modify this sound to what we end up getting. But what it does is it's sort of like polishing out the unique elements of all of these sounds so that we get very similar timbres out of all of them. The guitars, they could be using different tones when they're playing, different cabinets, different amps, different settings, different stomp box effects. But when they get in and then they get mixed and mastered, I feel like so much of their choice in hardware is erased and it's just this crunchy, gritty guitar sound. And the bass is no different. It's a lower tone, but it's lost that bassy oomph. That nice roundness that you get from the thicker strings. Um, and it just sounds the same as the guitar notes, just a bit lower. But even that a bit lower, the distance has been scrubbed out. So it's tonally lower, but the distance does not feel like the note's actually any lower than the guitars. So it just sounds like more guitar notes. And that's what I mean by all the identifying characteristics being erased. It's really just tones at this point. Um, like I think I said this during the reaction itself, but I can't really pick out any of the original sounds. I can't hear past the distortion or past the compression or past any of the digital modifications on these sounds. Usually, if someone has an electric guitar, they've distorted it, they put some compression on it, they give it this nice crunchy tone, you can still hear that guitarness under it. If somebody put a bass into that same rig, that same lineup of hardware, you would be able to hear the difference in the instruments. Even if you used a pick on both of them, or if you finger plucked on both of them, you would be able to hear some minor differences between them. You should be able to hear some of that round fatness that you're going to get off the bass. You can hear the smaller aspects, maybe a bit more tinier sound on the guitar. They're not going to sound the same, but here they do. They just get rid of all of the characteristics that really defines these instruments, and it ends up sounding, to me, it's like sound lacking an instrument, almost synth-like, where it's almost to the cusp of being entirely digital. And if somebody told me that this was done all digitally, that there were no instruments utilized in the creation of this song, I'd full on believe you. And in fact, saying that out loud, I could see it being, I could see it being an actual case here. If there are real instruments being used, they are just completely scrubbed of their identity and drastically changed. And that uncanniness mixes in with all of the other elements to create what I mentioned earlier, a very disorienting sound for me. I don't know if that's just their sound. I don't know if it has any thematic reason to be in this song specifically. If that was screaming in the background in the middle couple of minutes of this song, I definitely did not pick out any lyrics. I heard no audible, enunciations or syllables. It was just this random wailing, this random screaming that was just heavily altered to almost sound non-human. Um, it's really only in some of the ways that the sound came out that reminded me. And that's the thing, it reminded me of vocals. It didn't sound like vocals. It doesn't sound like a guitar. It doesn't sound like a bass. I think the drums is the only thing that has a real drumminess to it. But it's all these reminiscence. It reminds me of guitars and vocals and bass. And that's the only reason I think that they might have used real instruments, is because there's just this tiny hint of what they originally were before they were distorted into this. And it's just such a wild sound. Um, and that's just the sound design. We haven't even gotten into anything else. If we get into some of the compositional ideas, I don't know where to start and stop with this, because once again, everything seems to have been flattened out. Part of the thing about muddying up the sound and creating this wall of sound idea is that I can't really hear any distinctions in melodic lines, in chordal movements, in anything that I would see as the basis, the raw fundamentals of music composition. We end up with a song that, much like its sound design, just sounds like an amorphous, audio ball. So too with the song composition. I can't hear any beginnings or endings of ideas. There is two splits. We have the intro, and then that is very clearly different from the meat of the song, the middle 4.5 minutes or whatever, and then the outro, which again was very unique from the other two. But aside from those drastic departures, that middle part, the lengthiest part of the song, sort of just feels like one thing going on repeatedly. There's no beginning, there's no end, there's no breaks or changes. I heard minor variations. The drummer was doing a fantastic job at adding in little embellishments to lighten up their pretty standard metronome style of playing. They did a really good job of keeping the time while adding in a little bit of flavor and maybe some of their own characteristics, their own personality in playing. And that's really only because the drums stood out a bit, and I think it's because they're the percussive element. The only reason they stood out is because the other three instruments, the guitars, the bass, and the drummer, are melodic instruments. They play notes. Whereas the drums, if you want to play a different note, you got to play a different drum. And that's going to come along with its own timbre. So the notes have their own unique timbres. Even though they get mostly erased, there's still that little hint of the floor tom, the high tom, the snare, the hi-hat. They all still have a little bit of themselves in it. And it's the only thing that really stood out to me. Everything else, anything that played a note, just sort of came together in this singular idea. And like I said, I can't really tell if we entered new sections, if we never left a new section, if there was some sort of chorus or verse. It's a wild way to write a song. And the cool thing is, if you get the music in front of you, if they wrote sheet music for this, you can see, okay, maybe this is a verse, and this is a chorus, and this is, the part that comes after that. And then this is where the drum stepped out for a second, and this is where the bass ramped up into eighth notes rather than playing on the downbeats. But without that, without the roadmap, just listening to this, it is such a compressed sound from all angles that just removes identity in every aspect, and it is phenomenal, I think, from that perspective. I don't enjoy the song. I think it's interesting, mostly because of the mix. I would not mind getting my hands on sheet music or tablature if there's any out there. just so I could maybe see what the music is doing, because I cannot hear what the music is doing. And that, like I said, that just fascinates me. That's phenomenal. How you write music that still has an emotion, still has an atmosphere, still has a feeling. I'm not saying the song is bad. It's not for me. But as far as music being art and showcasing an idea or exploring an emotion or just being music, being a sound, having a song, um, these guys nailed it still, despite losing its identity in every aspect. It's created a new identity through that loss, and there is nothing that I've heard like this song. And, you know, as usual, they get points for that, even if it's just creativity, even if it's just uh, the gimmick or the I'm blanking out on that word, the novelty of hearing something like this. Like I said, there's still just a lot of points to be given for that, and I'm sure there's going to be people who love this. There is definitely uh, an audience for this type of music. As I've learned, there's an audience for every kind of music. No matter how small or large that audience might be, someone's going to listen to this and just completely rediscover themselves or fall in love with it, or it might be their comfort music. I don't know. Um, but yeah, where I stand, it's an interesting artistic piece. It intrigues me because it goes against everything that sort of stands as theoretical knowledge. It kind of go it kind of goes in the face of even standard engineering knowledge as well, and yet it still ends up being a song that can affect people. I'm walking away from this intrigued, and that's just phenomenal. So those are my thoughts on Murmuüre's Amethyst. I'm probably still pronouncing the band name wrong. This where you guys come in though. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this or not. Anything that stuck to you. Maybe you're more used to this. Your ears are more trained for this style of music, and you could pick out a lot of things. I want to know about that. All right, teach me here. It's one of those situations where I could definitely have some enlightenment and learn about something that I can't apply any of my knowledge to. When you're done commenting, you can head up to the description box. There's a link in there for Linktree. Everything adjacent to the channel's in there. You want Discord, you want Twitter, you want Patreon, you want special selections, you want some spreadsheets to see what we've checked out, what's on the docket for special selections. Everything's in there in a nice menu. It's super nifty. Above that, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, with another episode. We'll be finishing up Instrumentals Week. And until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.